Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld Ice Sheet Survival series, the first episode of the series by the way, in which our base will not be occupied by a single colonist for about 90% of the time. As you can see, the only living beings in our Ice Sheet base are currently the 3 Huskies, because last time we left off we had both Cambiar and Cobra form a caravan, and that caravan is currently on its way to a nearby colony, where we are looking to complete a lucrative trade. At the moment though, our 2 colonists are getting some rest, and at this point I will admit I made a small mistake last episode, because we did not take any bedrolls with us. Now, before Beta 19 was released, whether or not you had bedrolls in your caravan didn't really make much of a difference, because automatically your colonists would never use them. This has apparently been changed for the better in Beta 19, so we could have taken some with us, which would have made resting a bit more efficient and also slightly less uncomfortable. But it is what it is now, and we'll have to live with it. Maybe to make up for it, Randy Random also throws a fantastic gift at us to start off. Yes, you're seeing that right, a wild Thrumbo has just self-tamed, and with that, due to no effort of our own, we have just obtained arguably the most powerful animal in the game. However, it remains to be seen whether or not the Thrumbo will actually be able to survive. I'll go into detail about that in a second. For now, it's time to give the animal a name, and as promised, we are choosing one from the naming rights tier on Patreon. If you want to check that out, by the way, you can find a link at the end of the video and in the description. And the name that was randomly selected is Gabriel, after the patron Gabriel Diaz. So Gabriel, congratulations, the Thrumbo will now be named after you, even though I just realized it's female, but let's not get hung up on that. Now, before we can talk more about the Thrumbo, we unfortunately have some action out on the ice sheet. After the good comes the bad, and this time it's a raid, and once again we have no one home to actually protect the base. So hopefully our traps and turrets will be able to handle this. It is once again just a small group of tribalists, which actually surprises me a bit, because we have seen significantly larger raids before, and this right here is now the second time we only see a tiny group of attackers. So maybe Beta 19 has changed something about the way raids work. If you happen to know more about that, then please let me know. With this one though, things go as expected. The increased power of the deadfall traps immediately does its thing, as the first 2 attackers get killed off right away and the other 2 then decide to flee. Now let's get back to the Thrumbo. Now, while being a super powerful animal, Gabriel here will also be a bit of a burden. The reason for that is simple: Thrumbos do not eat meat, at least not in the form of raw meat or corpses. Due to their size, they also come with a pretty hefty appetite, and we calculated our Pemmican reserves on 3 Huskies. So to make sure both the Huskies and the Thrumbo do not starve to death, we'll have to switch things up a bit, and that means we'll have to move the Huskies out of our animal room, which we will now leave exclusively for the Thrumbo. We will also mark it as off limits for the Huskies, that way they will not consume any more Pemmican, while Gabriel here has all the remains for itself. For the time being, the Huskies can then feed on the 2 attackers that we just killed off, and we have quite a few more corpses in our storage room, so the Huskies should not be a problem. Gabriel the Thrumbo, however, I'm a bit worried about you at the moment. It could very well happen that we see all of our Pemmican consumed in just a few days, and we might still lose the Thrumbo to starvation. Now, I have an ace or 2 up my sleeve, but with the caravan out for at least a week or so, it's still going to be very close, so we'll have to see how things work out, and whether or not we'll end up with another corpse to add to the collection. Back out on the ice sheet, meanwhile, our caravan is making good progress. Cambiar and Cobra have roughly made it halfway to the colony, and if things continue to go as planned, they should make it there in just about 2 days. Back in the base, meanwhile, we have more problems arise. However, this one is actually not as big of an issue, for the very reason that we do not have a single colonist present. Yes, an Arctic wolf has gone manhunter, but man is the point of vital importance here, because as long as it is in its manhunting state, it will not attack animals. So we can safely ignore it for the time being, and as you can see here, it doesn't even move closer to the base. We should keep an eye on it though when the manhunting state wears off, because at that point it could grow hungry and its priorities might change. Now, the next day is here and the caravan is moving again. Cambiar and Cobra are getting closer and closer to their destination. As you can see on the bottom left, they are barely 1 day away. Meanwhile, back at the base, the events do not stop. We have cargo pods crash down, and conveniently enough, it is actually raining food. Unfortunately though, it's only more meat. Still, we will mark this to be hauled in by the Huskies, a task by the way that Gabriel the Thrumbo will eventually also be able to do, provided of course we train the animals sufficiently. Now, the remainder of the day proceeds without anything noteworthy, so we are now skipping ahead to the early morning hours of the next one, where we can see our manhunting wolf has outlived his manhunting madness, and that means it is now looking for food, be that human or animal. Conveniently enough though, 2 snow hares have also just wandered onto the map, and they immediately become the first target. Still, we should keep the wolf in mind. He is definitely a bit more powerful than any of our huskies, and especially since Ruby is pregnant again, I don't want to risk anything. That is also why we're now closing off the base for a while, and yes, that actually works without having a colonist present. We can simply use the zoning tool to send our animals where we need them to be. In this case, we will create a small animal zone right here next to our outermost door, and just for a brief moment here, we will delete the rest of the zone inside of the stables. This will immediately get our Thrumbo moving to the new zone, where it eventually passes the door that we have set to be closed. And once the door is shut, we can reverse the entire process, and with that the wolf can now no longer make it into our base, and Gabriel can return to the stables. Out on the ice sheet, meanwhile, we can see our caravan is getting closer and closer. It will only take a few more hours until they have reached their destination, and since absolutely nothing happens during that time, we'll jump ahead a bit, and here we are as Cambiar and Cobra have finally arrived in Gutra Mountain. Now, first things first, let's do what we came for, let's fulfill our trade request. You remember the colony here demanded 17 fire foam shells, and in return they're willing to give us a masterwork marine helmet. And here we are, we have just obtained what is arguably the most powerful helmet in the entire game. In terms of protection, there's absolutely nothing that can rival the marine helmet, and we just received one of the 2nd highest quality level in the game. And because of that, it would also be a waste not to make use of it, so Cambiar, who's currently wearing a Plasteel Advanced helmet, is now receiving an upgrade. With that, however, we are still not done here. Since we are here, we can also enter the normal trading menu now and see if we can strike a deal on any other wares. And we should be able to get something worthwhile here. After all, Cambiar has a trade inspiration, which should make his next trade a bit more profitable. Alright, we have a bit more traveling to do, so food would be nice. And since this colony here does not have any meals for sale, we will instead buy 300 units of Pemmican. And that almost exactly depletes all of the funds we have brought with us, but I still prefer that over having one of our colonists starve. Speaking of those colonists, it is now time for their journey to continue. However, they will not return home immediately, at least not both of them. Instead, we will now split up the caravan and send both of them in different directions. Now Cobra will take everything with him apart from a few meals and the Pemmican, and will then send him on what is roughly going to be a 4-day trip back to our base. Cambiar, on the other hand, will not return to the base right away. Instead, he will take the rest of the supplies, so a few meals and the Pemmican, and then head east, because we have a very conveniently located pirate outpost very close by. And for that pirate outpost, we have actually received a small quest, as clearing it out will reward us with an AI persona core. And as you can see here, there should not be too much resistance. Only 2 enemies are guarding the outpost. There is no mention of turrets or anything of the sorts, and that would be mentioned here if there were any. So if we're careful and wait for the right moment to attack, Cambiar should be able to handle things. Back inside of the base then, we have not 1 but 2 problems. First of all, we can see our Pemmican reserves are almost entirely depleted, and it will roughly take 4 more days until Cobra arrives back home and is able to make more. On top of that, we now also have another raid coming in. Thankfully though, it is only a single mechanoid lancer. Now these enemies, formerly known as Scythers, have also been reworked slightly in Beta 19. The Scythers are still there, but they are now purely melee-based enemies, while the Lancers have inherited the charge lance for long-range firepower, but they have also been reduced in speed and no longer possess any noteworthy melee capabilities. While the Lancer is making its approach, we also have another set of cargo pods crash down. This time it's 106 units of lizard skin, not necessarily a high tier leather, but still, just like any leather in the game, not completely useless either. So we will haul it back to the base when the mechanoid threat has ended, which by the way has just arrived at our front door, the one that we closed off just a few moments ago, which will now unfortunately lead to the Lancer destroying it to get through. Still, we have a few more lines of defense in place, so this is not too big of a problem. After it makes its way through, the Lancer also immediately gets its comeuppance. Yes, it survives the first trap, but the second one kills it immediately, and with that, another raid is successfully fended off. Another night then passes by without any further events, and on the next day we can see Cobra and Cambiar have already made good progress towards their next destinations, but before they can get any closer we are once again interrupted, this time by a crashed transport pod with the Nurse Ray inside. Now, without a colonist to haul her back to the base, we can't really do much for her. Still, let's have a closer look just to see what we're missing out on. Injury-wise, here we have a scar on the right leg which causes pain and slightly reduced movement speed, so that doesn't look too good. And skill-wise, we also have an incapability of violence, while apart from her medical and social skills, nothing else really stands out to me. So this time we have no other option but to let the ice sheet do its thing, but all in all I would say we're not missing out on much. For Gabriel the Thrumbo, meanwhile, the situation is now looking a bit dire. We have officially run out of Pemmican and Gabriel is still very hungry. There is, however, at least a temporary solution for that, if we allow Gabriel to leave the stables. As soon as we do, he now makes a beeline for the hydroponics farms, because of course those have fully matured already, and Gabriel can actually eat the rice directly from the hydroponics basins. As you can see though, it is a fairly inefficient way of satisfying Gabriel's appetite, so once again this solution will not last long. Thankfully though, Cobra is already on the return trip. This, by the way, also means that we can now let the Huskies back into the stables. Since all the Pemmican is gone, food sources will now no longer overlap. Meanwhile, on the world map, evening sets in and our two colonists are getting some rest. Cambiar is still a bit over 1.5 days away from his location, while Cobra will roughly take just under 3 to get back home. Now, small problem back at home. You remember the wolf from earlier, which has now consumed both of the snow hares and is therefore now left without a food source, and since the Lancer destroyed our door, also with a way into our base. So we are now doing that whole door closing business again. Unfortunately, this time Gabriel decides to take a long nap before actually doing something, but the wolf is also still sleeping, so the door is luckily closed in time. Just to make extra sure, we will now also forbid all of the doors, and yes, I know that lizard skin is still out there, but in my opinion that's not worth risking a fight with a wolf over. As you can see here, our Huskies have also now consumed both of the corpses outside of the base, so we need new food sources for them as well. So first of all, we will unforbid the insect meat. That should keep them going for a day, and that will also allow them limited access to our corpse storage room, where they can chew away at least on the first few corpses. For our two colonists, meanwhile, their respective journeys continue pretty smoothly. That is until Cobra suffers a mental breakdown. Now, neither one of our two colonists have really been able to fill their joy meter lately, and for Cobra that was now the final straw, as he is currently wandering aimlessly around the ice sheet. Now, for Cobra himself, that is really not that big of a problem. He does have enough food after all, and he will still sleep as long as he's out here on the world map, but his breakdown of course significantly delays his return to the colony. And while our Huskies still have plenty of corpses to chew through, the food situation for Gabriel is becoming more and more critical. Another cargo drop then quickly brought my hopes up, but unfortunately it is once again nothing edible. Still, 88 units of Megasloth wool are pretty useful out here on the ice sheet, so we will also mark them to be hauled, provided of course we can find a way to take care of the wolf threat first. The corpse of Ray here, by the way, that could actually be a convenient distraction for the wolf, who might prefer to eat without having to go hunting first. Just a few moments later then, an interesting development, as a fairly sizable group of man-hunting snow hares appears. Now, since they are manhunters, they will of course not attack the wolf, but if it gets hungry, the wolf might very well attack them. So we will definitely have to keep an eye on that. However, as long as all the doors into our base are closed, we are in relative safety. In the early morning hours, then the big relief with Cobra. His mental break is over and he will resume his travels shortly, so there is hope after all for our very hungry Thrumbo. Now, just to give Gabriel a bit more of a chance, we will now also open access to those 7 units of rice back in the cooking area. Of course, not much and definitely far away from a full meal, but maybe just enough to avoid starvation. Now, after the arrival of the snow hares, we actually have a very interesting situation here at the moment, because in their manhunting state, the snow hares will not attack our animals, and should the wolf get hungry, it will very likely prefer a fight with the snow hare over a fight with the Huskies. And for those reasons, I think it's actually relatively safe now to open up our gates and to send our Huskies out to haul lizard skin and Megasloth wool. And yes, in fact, as Ace makes his way across the ice sheet here, the other animals do not seem to react. Shortly after then, Cambiar finally reaches his next destination. He has made his way over to the pirate outpost, so let's have a quick look at what we're dealing with. And as expected, we are only facing 2 enemies with no additional defenses. The first one here has a knife, the other one has a mace, so Cambiar and his charge rifle should be able to take care of things without much trouble. Alright, quick and easy, it only took 1 kill to complete the quest. So attacking apparently works the same way as defending, and trying to catch that second enemy is likely going to be a waste of time. So instead we can now claim the doors of their small hideout and have a quick look at what's inside. Maybe we can find something valuable or even just some appliances that we can take with us and sell. Right, the first room here only has a heater and a lamp, so nothing too valuable. The second one also has 4 beds, but will very likely not be able to carry those. And number 3 is the same as the first. Now, before we can send Cambiar back home, we are also once again prompted to go back to our own base, where the very same Arctic wolf has once again gone mad. Still, just like before, that is not that big of a problem. After all, there is not a single human on the map at the moment. Now, while we're here, we can also quickly check out our quest reward. Yes, we are now in possession of an AI persona core, so one of the most vital components of building a spaceship is taken care of, as the core has been dropped right outside of our base. Now back to Cambiar, who is not going to leave again right away. After all, we can see Cambiar is pretty hungry and could use some food, and he hasn't had a cannibal meal in a while, so how about we change that as a reward for a successful mission. And with a filled hunger bar and a plus 20 mood boost, we can now reform the caravan once more. Cambiar will take all of the food as well as the mace the enemy dropped, and we could in theory also take a heater or some of the lamps with us, but their weight to value ratio is nothing special, and they weigh quite a bit, which would then slow Cambiar down unnecessarily. So we'll leave them here in favor of the slightly faster movement speed, and with that we can now also finally send Cambiar back home. And back home, that is where we can now see another crashed escape pod. Inside, Giggles, who is currently suffering from various injuries, including an old gunshot wound to his left leg. On top of that, he also has quite a few incapabilities, so since he is pretty much guaranteed to either die here or make it off the map, we are once again not losing out on much. Soon after, our already somewhat interesting situation out here on the ice sheet gets even more interesting, as a trade caravan arrives near our base. And these are now in fact the first humans in a long time to set foot on the map, which of course immediately triggers all of the manhunters. We can see it here, the snow hares and the wolf are already rushing in, and soon after a pretty chaotic slaughtering begins. The caravan here also with no regard for the safety of their own members. We can see quite a few people get caught in the crossfire, but at least after a short while we no longer have to worry about any man-hunting animals. And just moments after their arrival, the caravan also leaves again. Not only did they not find anyone to trade with, but temperatures are apparently also getting too cold for comfort, and so the caravan now moves on. A good time for a status update regarding Gabriel. There is absolutely no more food left on the map for Gabriel to consume, and for that reason we are already in the early stages of malnutrition, which is going to proceed pretty rapidly. But just a few hours later, in the early morning, we once again have cargo pods crash down. Unfortunately though, it is once again only more wool. So as always, we'll mark that to be hauled, but of course it's not going to make our Thrumbo any less hungry. Shortly after, we are then presented with a peace talks opportunity, but I think as usual we're going to ignore that. It would make peace with the last remaining hostile tribe on the map, which would effectively also remove any chance for tribal raids, which are in my opinion still the easiest to handle. Now, thankfully, the rest of the day proceeds without any more incidents, and then in the late evening, Cobra finally makes it back home. After a long journey, he arrives back on the ice sheet and summer is already over. We are already a few days into fall, but most importantly, Cobra also carried some food with him, and our Thrumbo is of course going to consume that immediately. The malnutrition, by the way, is already up to severe levels, so Cobra's arrival came just in time. A day or two longer and Gabriel here might not have survived. Now, Cobra also just equipped Cambiar's old plus steel helmet. That is not going to keep him as warm, but it will offer slightly better protection. After a night full of rest and a morning full of joy, Cobra then starts with the food production. Up first, we of course need to re-sow some rice, because of course the plants need their time to grow. Afterwards, we can then slaughter that mega spider we still had lying around. The insect meat is of course not going to be super delicious for our colonists, but since the animals will be the main consumers of the meals we're now making, I think it's a good way to get rid of the meat without harming the colony too much. With Cobra back in the base, we can now also rebuild that outermost door that was destroyed earlier. After all, that has always been a very useful gateway into our base. At this point we are also contacted with another quest to clear out another enemy outpost. However, this one looks to be a bit more fortified. Once again, we would only have 2 enemies against us, but they would be backed up by a mortar gun and 2 turrets, so sending only one of our colonists over to take care of things would probably be a bit too risky, and understandably I don't want to abandon the base again just yet. With the door constructed and all of the hostile animals on the map taken care of, we can now also make sure it stays open. And afterwards we can also begin flicking off the coolers, because as you can see in the lower right corner, temperatures are dropping again, which means we are no longer risking infestations. While Cambiar is asleep then, we have a fire breakout in the base, and I can't stress enough how thankful I am that this did not happen when no one was home. I admit I completely forgot about this possibility, but just a few days earlier and a fire like this could have burned down our entire base. Now, to get to the source of the fire, I actually went ahead and deconstructed some of the walls, and at this point I also realized that this is not an ideal setup, and I remember a few of your comments already telling me that in the past, so we might very well overhaul our power connections soon. One more thing that got completely lost in the shuffle meanwhile, Cambiar has also made it back home. And he also has some food on him. He will now drop off some pemmican and also a few meals, and with that I feel safe to say we did actually manage to keep our Thrumbo Gabriel alive. On the next day then, the mad animal rampage continues. This time, however, it's only a single snow hare, and instead of sitting this one out, we're taking action immediately, and with his assault rifle, Cobra makes quick work of the rodent. And at this point, I think it's about time we wrap the episode up. Both of our colonists have successfully made it back home to the base, we have completed a lucrative trade and a rewarding mission as well, and to top it all off, Thrumbo Gabriel has joined the colony, so things are definitely looking up out here on the ice sheet. Now, before we go, I also want to give a quick shout out to all the new patrons who've joined since the last time we did this, and a special shout out goes out to Ilka Savilampe, I hope I pronounced that correctly, who provided me with this picture of his dog Manta as a spirit animal for our Huskies in this Rimworld series. And I think Manta did a fine job in today's episode. Our Huskies stayed alive despite numerous threats, and we can only hope her guidance extends to Gabriel the Thrumbo as well. So once again, thank you Ilka for the sweet picture, and of course also for your generous pledge. And of course a big thank you also goes out to a pretty long list of new patrons this time. So thank you to Siaki van Bomen, to Lucas Schmidt, to Rohan Moore, to Guillaume Nobert, to Aaron Connors, Grundle Fungus, Carl Emil Henriksen Hansen, to Thriller of Autumn, to Raul Miranda, Kat, Zubin Madden, Belzebeth, John, Wargul, Ben Hollingshead, to Stefan Brandfjell, to Thomas Gill, to Eric Eicher, to Gabriel Diaz, who had the Thrumbo named after him, to David Goike, Halfto Hero, Stefan Walker, Cal Winter, to Baylor Herman and Master Burns, to Christopher Riley, to Mathieu Bocard, to Zach Kay, and last but not least to Thomas Wakefield. Thank you all so much for your support. The Pete Complete Patreon has just grown to 100 patrons. We are very close to reaching the next goal, and your support really means so much to me. I might even be able to slightly cut down working hours because of you, and to think that this series is in large parts responsible for that, that really warms my heart, and so once again I want to say thank you. So at this point we are making the cut. As always, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, then I would be happy if you could leave a thumbs up. And if you want to support the channel further and want to stay up to date on all the latest videos, then go ahead and feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. Or you can of course also join the growing list of patrons, maybe even get your name in one of the next videos. For more info, simply check out the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.